False sense of security makes you think that all I need to do is just get the other job and it will be better. But if some things don't shift and change, you're going to be back there again in some way because the patterns repeat themselves.
You have a great story about how women have moved from job trauma to their wholeness, and then they have another life basically on the other side of that.
And everybody respected her and everything was on target, meeting deadlines and things were great. Well,
There's sexism in the workplace. What's your take on how job trauma is really pushing women to stop believing in their power?
reasons why I think that happens. I also think there's obvious trauma, like
Enough already! You've worked harder, stayed later, smiled through it, you've shrunk yourself, you've overexplained yourself, you've apologized for yourself, and still walked away feeling like you were the problem. You weren't. You've been playing by rules that were never designed for you, and you're exhausted. You're done. I'm Coach Mo Fall, and this is Enough Already, the podcast for women who are done performing and ready to heal, reclaim, and redefine what their life actually gets to look like when you step into your real power. No more shrinking, no more trying to be less or more, or whatever they need you to be. We're going to name exactly what happened, get free from it, and figure out what comes next. This is your space. This is your moment. Women, we are rising. Let's get into it.
Job trauma is real. Nobody's talking about it because no one understands it. For the past 6 years or so, I've been talking about job trauma because I've coached over 2,200 women, professional women who are just not able to marshal their forces to get where they want to be. And you know what? Job trauma is real for professional women. I'm joined today with one of my favorite and best people on the planet and a fellow coach, our executive and leadership coach, Stacey Citrin. Stacey, welcome to this Enough Already podcast.
thanks, Mo. Happy to be here.
Yeah. There's a confusion about maybe burnout and what I call to be job trauma. You and I have been coaching thousands of women and hundreds of women for multiple years in a row to help them get powerful, stay powerful, and navigate the workplace. As I began coaching 12 years ago, I realized that there were some deep psychological, emotional wounds that women were carrying because there's sexism and a double, triple standard in place in the workplace. What's your take on how job trauma is really pushing women to stop believing in their power?
Well, there's several reasons why I think that happens. I also think there's obvious trauma, like losing a job. That is is an obvious trauma. And women may feel more, I don't want to use the word accepted, but expected when you lose a job to have trauma about it. The way it was handled. You could have thought you've been doing a great job, even a layoff, even a major company layoff. And then you exiting a job because you have been tired of being beaten up. So that doesn't mean you don't have trauma from it. So I think there's those types of trauma. And then there's the in-work day-to-day trauma. And both of them stay with you.
Sort of the microaggressions that happen. What we're seeing often is women who either get the promotion or get told to take on this big project, or they have taken on the big project. They outperform everyone in the room, and somehow they're still left with that feeling that something was wrong with them. And that's not really a confidence problem. It's really deeper, and that's what we're going to dive in today. I'm thinking of a few specific clients who their boss was so horrible that they were eventually moved out by the company. And then even though our client was more qualified, more capable, and had more leadership and track record, they brought in
Experience, if you will.
they brought in someone from the outside who fit into the upper hierarchy. I've coined this term job trauma because what's up with that? Like, enough already for women getting passed over for promotions when, let's just be honest, we really wanted someone who looked more corporate, or we wanted someone who wasn't going to rock the boat or do too much. Like, enough already. I
Yeah, and
named this
sometimes, Mo,
because of this. They don't even
sometimes they
say
don't
that.
even say
No,
that,
no, no,
right?
no. Right.
Exactly.
They're not going to
So
say that.
you're
Right.
almost, as a woman in this, you're almost blaming yourself. Like, what did I do wrong?
Yeah. Yeah,
Right?
it's not,
So
yeah. And it's not just the experience that feels off, it's a wound that changes how we feel, the woman feels, that makes us show up differently afterwards. Like, why am I going to be as committed if they just passed me over and hired some dude, and I'm going to say it that way, who doesn't have half what I bring to the table? And this language of trauma, I don't mean to go into the psychological, psychiatric definition, although there's that also. And if ladies, if you have real severe trauma in your past, please seek mental health and physical health for what you might need for that. We're really talking about a situational, ongoing pattern of being disregarded, disrespected, pushed back, told lies, insulted, and you and I both know, having worked together for years, many years ago, that I'm a little bit bold. I saw myself through problems, challenges, and solutions and was able to articulate what I needed. And you know as well as I do, one particular boss, she happened to be a woman, but she was very masculine energy oriented. And she criticized me in front of clients. She demeaned me. She insulted me. She disrespected me. And I'm going to say this. This is a woman who I helped move into a new house one weekend. I gave a weekend up because I was like the dutiful VP, direct
mhm.
report. My boss is moving. I'm excited for her. I want to be helpful, et cetera, et cetera. And all I got from her was disrespect and demeaned. And as you know, one of our projects required us to really get a whole nother level of software that she lied about. And I couldn't deliver to the client. And I had to come back and say, you were wrong. You lied. We need this to fulfill this. And she was like, okay, but I don't like the fact that you couldn't figure it out without it. That's a trauma. Like, I'm still talking about that 30 years
Yeah.
later. And this is why I coined the term, because not only have I seen it with our clients, I've experienced it. And I know you were gaslit a
Yeah.
few times in your career. Not that often because you
Yeah.
hold your own
Not that
pretty
often.
tough. But
Yeah.
let's keep talking about this so that anyone who's listening can really feel and understand, A, it's not you, B, it happens, C, we got something to help fix it, and we see you.
Also, Mo, with your example of you helping that executive move, the executive happened to be your boss, and you were there for her, et cetera, et cetera. So you got a false sense of security with that.
Ooh, yes, indeed. Good.
And
Yes.
I see that
Mm-hmm.
over and over with women. They
Mm-hmm.
develop relationships, they think they're quote unquote friends.
Yeah.
It's never friends. And I
Yeah.
tell them that all the time. Doesn't mean the person's not nice. Maybe
Yeah.
they are nice. I'm not
Right.
saying they don't care, but they're
Mhm.
not your friend. So
Yes.
you did a good deed also because you're a
Mhm.
good person on top of that. And you got a false sense of security with this relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? I always felt prickly around her. And I think this is where job trauma really shows up. When you're flinching when your boss calls you into a meeting, when you've done nothing wrong but you feel like you're being called to the principal's office for detention, when you're over explaining, over delivering, over apologizing, and we put on this sense of armor that is
Mhm.
built being because we've been penalized for existing in a room. We've been penalized for having thoughts, opinions, ideas, and strategies. So we've then now, the trauma makes us, I'm just going to use those words, shrink, and maybe we don't advance our ideas. Maybe we let someone else talk. Then we
Yeah,
have
you
this,
begin hiding.
yes, and we have this hypervigilance that's safe for me to say something, who's going to criticize me. And there's this double standard we keep navigating like we're on a tightrope, for God's sake.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point, we have a breaking point. And that's often where we see women think that quitting is the only way to exit this toxic workplace. But if you only quit, you're going to carry this trauma into every job afterwards.
That's
And
right.
this double standard is the source of the wound. Plain and simple. You are being treated differently because it's a man's world and they still haven't figured out how to handle women who have power, presence, and productivity and profitability. We've seen women with such great outcomes. A man
And the
who's
false
direct.
sense of security makes
Yeah.
you think that if I just get another job, all I
Mhm.
need to do is just get the other job
Yes.
and it will be better. But if some things don't shift and change, you're going to not always, usually be back there again in some way, maybe not
Absolutely.
exactly that way, but
Absolutely.
some way,
Right.
because the patterns repeat themselves
Until you fix it.
till you become aware, number one.
Mhm. Right. The data shows that what we're talking about is supported by studies that are done in the workplace. In particular, the McKinsey leanin.org organization puts out a workplace, women in the workplace report every year. I dive into it to see if anything's changed. No. So what happens is that women don't get lifted up by others the same way men do. Women of color, even less so. And to put it plainly, a man who is direct is decisive. A woman who is direct is difficult. A man who sets limits is respected. A woman who sets limits is not a team player. And these aren't one off moments, they accumulate. And you are thinking of clients as well as I am, because this accumulated misattunement is what we are calling job trauma. And women blame themselves for this
Yes.
emotional core problem because the workplace rarely says, "We did this to you." No, they say,
And
"You're
Mo,
being too
they
sensitive."
exactly. And sometimes those people have their patterns, the people who are making you feel that way or putting you in those situations.
Yeah.
They're not like in your situation.
Mhm.
She had no idea she was doing that to you. It was just her
Hmm.
persona.
The way she had to be in the workplace in order to protect herself and get what
Exactly.
she needed and be who
Exactly.
she needed to be.
Right. But if I
Mhm.
remember, and again, I don't remember all the details of that, but it's the same thing. Did you expect your boss to change?
I had expectations that she would treat me differently, having seen the work product that
That
I
you
was doing,
produced. Right.
including following through and completing rather heroic requests on her part to me and the team. So,
Hmm.
yes, I did expect her to be different towards me. And maybe I did the move with her thinking, oh, well, that'll be the thing that will tip the scales in my favor. And it just doesn't work.
Right.
And
She
job
doesn't even
trauma,
realize it.
right, exactly. Job trauma can't be healed by getting a new job. As you know, I did move into a new job several months after that job ended. And I knew I was bringing this wound to me. And my new job was at a health system. I felt it was going to be a fresh start for me. And the problem is, and it's at that job that I started hiring a coach to help me. I didn't recognize that it was my pattern as much as it was a workplace treating women a certain way. I'm not saying that women, we need to blame ourselves, but there is inner work for us to become less
Yep.
porous and more powerful, because
Shifts.
exactly, that's exactly where I was going to
Yeah.
say. This
And
shift,
sometimes they're not even big shifts. It's when you recognize them.
yes,
I'm sure you recognize some of the patterns and shifts you needed to make by coaching because I'm sure your coach held the mirror up a little bit.
that's right.
And when you were in it,
Hmm.
that mirror could not be held at that time. At that time.
Yeah, that's true. So when one is in a situation that is very hurtful, it's really difficult to take a close look at it.
Right.
There needs to be a little bit of space to sort of recalibrate enough to say, "Oh yeah, I see how that was." And I've grown so much since then. Always recontextualize those challenging moments as growth opportunities. But The thing that happens so often with our clients is that they're stewing in the something is wrong with me. And
Yes.
therefore, they miss opportunities. They don't take on additional assignments. They're exhausted at home and their home life might be suffering. They're not picking up the hobbies or hanging out with friends the way they used to because all they can do is complain and bitch about work because that is the thing that is owning them. Instead of saying something was done to me that I need to be part of the fix. And let's think about one client in particular. There's a client that we had who is a quality engineer, and she was doing, by her accounts, a great job. And she and her boss never saw things the same way. And now she looks at it and realizes she was in a job that was too small for her. And at the same time, she didn't know how to navigate crucial conversations. She didn't know how to do anything but say what was right and wrong because as an engineer, that's typically the training. This way works, this way doesn't. That's why this work doesn't. And so she got so sideways with this boss, she was fired. And in her early 50s, she thought perhaps her career was washed up. And thank goodness she clicked on an ad and came into our program. And by the way, if you're listening to this podcast, there's a few ways that you can interact with us and interact with our work. Go to mofall.com and check out what we've got going on our website. At the time you see this podcast, there may be multiple ways that we have entry points for the coaching that we do. So check it out, mofall.com, to see what's available for you at this point. So this particular client came to us and she started doing the inner work and she realized how much baggage was inside of her, not just from that situation, but many times before. And as a woman engineer, especially in the quality engineering space where she works, typically in a manufacturing environment, she was always on the wrong side of the work environment, being one of the few females. And as she healed, as she grew into the truth about herself, she was able to forgive herself and back into her power and to be able to see what she brings to the table, landing a great job in a much better company, feeling whole and full and capable. And she moved across the country and she's had some of the elements of the dynamics, but now she has not only a full sense of herself, she has tools and she has more of a calmness about that. This is what work involves. It involves navigating people and the environment in which we work. And this is a natural part of life. Do you have someone who comes to mind as we're talking about this so we can wrap up with another great story about how women have moved from job trauma to their wholeness and then they have another life basically on the other side of that?
Sure. I mean, there's story after story, Mo, and I don't know the particular client you were talking about, but I have a client that was with an organization 16 years in IT systems, healthcare. Okay.
Mhm.
And she moved up and she had a great job, and her boss was out on FMLA. So the organization really relied on her. And
Mhm.
she was really starting to shine. And it was at that time that she realized she was having a seat at the table. She was in the room. People
Yeah.
were respecting her and things were going great. She thought when her boss came back, her boss would be happy that she has kept everything going and everybody respected her and everything was on target, meeting deadlines, and things were
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Well,
Wah, wah.
exactly. The actual opposite happened. Her boss was totally threatened by this, of course, not saying this, but in her actions, started pushing her out of meetings, taking work away from her, and eventually eliminated the position.
I remember this story.
This client was crushed,
Crushed.
crushed. Again,
And rightfully
again,
so.
exactly, rightfully so. She did everything she should. She
Yeah.
stepped into her boss's shoes, not just stepped, did it, exceeded it. Everybody knew it.
Yeah.
But the organization still supported this senior VP to eliminate her position.
Yeah.
She was not just crushed by her boss, but crushed by the senior leadership's actions of not protecting her.
Right. Like, enough already. This is why
Enough.
we're here talking about these things, because
Yes.
enough already.
Right.
And women, hear us say this to you. The work has to be done internally. You have to migrate
First.
to a place of power and
First.
wholeness. And maybe that could be therapy. We've certainly done enough coaching that we've helped a lot of women through this, through our coaching programs. And I will say this, women, it's the environment of work, and we're still not at the generation, although there are some companies that are much better than what we're talking about. So there are companies that wouldn't necessarily have this culture, but there's still probably the majority that do. You have to make your own self live at a more whole, powerful level where this is seen as child's play versus seen as something that keeps feeling like a 1,000 cuts. Stacey and I are going to continue to talk about topics that really rattle women in the workplace: burnout, making sure you're not overcommitted, how to deal with your chronic exhaustion, how to say no. What does success really look like? And Stacey and I have both been in the C-suite. We both were working moms. We've been up the ladder, and we know some of the tricks of the trade to not just thrive, but to also enjoy a life. And I'm going to say this, we're also going to talk about rest as a requirement. We're going to talk about the version of you that you cannot keep putting off, and all sorts of these things on Enough Already. Women, it's time to take back your power and own who you want to be. We can't change the world externally, but we can change who we are. Stacey, thanks for joining me for this great conversation. I'm sure it's not the last time we'll talk about job trauma. It is a real issue that we coach our women through, and it's been a pleasure to get this aired out. And we'll see you on the next episode, everyone. This is Stacey Citrin and Coach Mo, mofall.com. And enough already. Let's take back your power, women. If today's episode hit home, share it with a woman who needs to hear it. Because the best thing we can do is make sure no woman sits alone in an experience that has a name. You've been listening to Enough Already. I'm Coach Mo Fall. Please subscribe and like and comment so this can be sent to more women just like you who needs to hear there is a different way. Take good care.